Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Member Lounge podcast. In this podcast, you learn how to grow your association membership. I'm your host, Farha Khan. I'm the CEO of Member Lounge. If you don't know about us, Member Lounge is like a private LinkedIn for your association members, where you can deliver the right content to the right member at the right time. With Member Lounge, you can take your membership marketing on autopilot so that member engagement just happens without you having to work hard for it. You can see a demo of Member Lounge on our website at memberlounge.app. Again, that is memberlounge, all one word, .app. This is a live recording of our podcast. If you're joining us live today, welcome. We're also streaming this live on LinkedIn. So if you're joining us on LinkedIn, welcome there as well. Today, we're excited to have Farra Trompeter with us. Farra is the co-director of Big Duck Agency, and she's joining us all the way from New York. Farra, thank you so much for joining us today. Can you start by telling us a bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me, and I'm excited to meet everybody in the community here today and beyond. So again, my name is Farra Trompeter. I use she, her pronouns. And I've been at Big Duck for 17 years. I'm co-director there. I help run the company, and I also am a worker owner. We're a worker-owned cooperative. There's questions about that. I can certainly answer those later. And we really focus on helping organizations use communications to achieve their mission. So we work on helping nonprofit organizations, membership associations, foundations, government agencies really figure out how to build strong brands, strong campaigns, and strong teams. And so we use communications as kind of the way we describe our work, but we touch on fundraising, membership, community engagement, all sorts of outreach, recruitment, all sorts of other strategies. And we've got 14 full-time people. We also produce a podcast called the Smart Communications Podcast. We just had an episode drop today. And I'm really excited to be here. We're a virtual company. We used to be in an office in Brooklyn, New York, but during the pandemic and beyond, we became fully remote.
That's wonderful. We have been remote and we're trying to come back to the office. Let's see how that goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Farra, so a lot of our association clients, they are wondering how to properly structure their communication, what strategies to use. So they already have some things in place, but if you were to revisit that, how would you do that? Where would you start?
Yeah, it's always good to start at the beginning. I think first it's important to start with context, really understanding what is happening with your members, what is happening with your organization. Whenever you're building a communications plan, you want to first make sure it's rooted in the organization and in the community you're trying to reach. So what is happening now or in the near future in the lives of the people you're trying to connect with in the world, in your state, in your community, in your country, sort of depending on what your association is focusing on, and really just thinking about what's coming up. So for example, here in the US, elections are coming up in November. That's very much on people's minds. If you were going to be doing communications in that time, you might need to think about, do you mention that? Does it come up? Does it not come up? How does that play in to what you're doing? And or is there major legislation happening that could be impacting the lives or the work of the members you're working in? Again, depending on what your mission is. So first is what's happening and what does communications really need to do for us given this moment? Are we in a place where we're facing declining participation rates in our membership? We're having a hard time with retention. So we need communications to really focus on how do we keep the members that we have? Or are we in a place where we've actually been growing and renewing members and attracting new members at a great increase year over year? And so how do we keep building that momentum? And when we think about growth, or are we in a place where, wow, we actually have to charge more for membership and we need to really think about how to communicate the value of what it means to be a member? And what we need to really focus in on is branding or some kind of messaging. So starting with context and with all of that in mind, and knowing what you need as an organization, what your members need, what the world might need from you, setting some goals. So I always think it helps to have at least one primary goal or destination. So in other words, if your communications plan might be for a year, might be for 3 years, but really thinking about if communications was working and doing everything it could for our organization, let's say on a 3-year horizon, what does success look like? What is that destination we need to head towards? So again, it looks like we've doubled our membership. It looks like we have, increased our revenue from membership from A to B. It looks, what is that? Where do we need to go and set that goal? Just so that we can always be clear of where we're trying to get to. And then from there, we can then get into the rest of the plan, which I'm sure we'll talk about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So the you actually mentioned the timeliness of communication, what is happening around you in the
Mm-hmm.
world, maybe in the professional
Mm-hmm.
area in general, elections or anything else. Now, like,
Right.
so if we, so that is always important. But if we want to kind of like create something that is evergreen, so some
Mm.
foundational practices, if like within the organization that we will always do, maybe the foundation is broken, you know. So if you want to like start
Mm-hmm.
with the foundation, what would you do?
Yeah, I mean, the context just helps us know where to go. And then from there,
Hmm.
we're setting goals. And then from those goals, we're really being clear about our audiences. And then once we're clear about our audiences, we're figuring out what are the strategies and the tactics and where are we spending time. I think a lot of people, when it comes up to communications, immediately, and I know some of the questions we got for today, and we'll get into them, immediately go to what we call tactics or activities. Should I, send my email newsletter more or less? Should I be abandoning X, formerly known as Twitter, or should I be doing more there? Like, there's a lot of questions about communications channels and activities, and that's where you live once a communications plan is up and running. But I think the foundation is things like being clear about that goal, being clear
Hmm.
about who are the most important audiences to engage, and making decisions coming back to those goals and audiences and not just looking at something in and of itself, but always
Hmm.
remembering that it is supposed to ladder back to helping us reach our goals, helping us reach our communities.
So we talked earlier about audience priorities. Can you tell us a bit more about that? Like, how would you prioritize your audiences and the audience's goals overall?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to prioritize audiences. One is first simply just starting to list all the different audiences that your organization could reach or engage, given your mission, given what you're trying to do. So again, it might be members and non-members, but maybe you put a finer point on that. But is it residents in a certain community? Is it, all, for example, um, if you're a membership association within a certain practice area or profession, let's say we want to reach every single accountant, we want to reach every single real estate agent. Like again, depending on what your association is about. So who are all the possible audiences you can reach, and then you can think from there. It could be as simple as who's primary, who's secondary, who's the most important, who are your top three, and who are the ones that would be nice to reach, but maybe are not as essential. If you, or another way to think about it is the founder of Big Duck, my former boss, Sarah Durham, wrote a book a few years ago called The Nonprofit Communications Engine. And in the Nonprofit Communications Engine, we've got a framework for audiences, which is really like a bullseye. And at the center of the bullseye is the audiences you must engage. Then the next ring is the audiences you should engage. And then the final outer ring is the audiences you could engage. And a lot of times, when we're working with communications, because things like your website and your TikTok or Instagram or whatever could reach anybody who happens to stumble upon it. And there's a lot of people you could reach, but really being clear about who you must reach and then who you should reach can help us when we have to make decisions. Most of our organizations never have enough time or money or staff when it comes to doing this work. So, audience prioritization is not about trying to close doors to anyone, trying to exclude anyone. It's about simply saying, who should we be having at the top of our minds when we are trying to do our membership strategy or reach people to get them to renew or participate in something that we're trying to do. Um, Another framework we often recommend is thinking about how easy or hard is it to reach somebody, how deeply or superficially is somebody involved now, right? We can come up with an audience, but if they're not engaged with us at all now and it's very hard to reach them, it's going to take a lot more time and money as opposed to the people maybe who are engaged with us and are easy to reach. And so even just thinking about it among a few different axes can be helpful. So there's lots of different ways to prioritize. The point is come up with a few, two to three, I know that's hard, top audiences, and then really learn about them. Understand what their preferences are. Understand what is in it for them. What do they want from you? Because a lot of times in our strategies, we're prioritizing what our organization or our association wants. And that's important, of course. But the more we can be audience centric, the more we can understand who our audiences are and what they need to participate with us, what they need to make their lives better, and how our organization can deliver that to them where they want to hear from us, the better the impact and results will be of our communications activities.
Do you have any advice on how to learn about your members or audience better?
Yeah, ask.
Ask.
Basically,
Yeah.
we're at Big Duck big fans of doing a lot of firsthand research. So that could look, or primary research, that could look like interviews, surveys, focus groups. So depending on your organization, we were talking about how you're bringing your team back in person. If you're an organization that is in person, your membership comes together in person, maybe there are events or networking or luncheons, whatever it may be, have conversations when people come in the door, like, what brought you here today? How did you hear about today's event? What are you interested in learning more about from us? What can we do to make your experience better? Right? If you've got that chance to ask while they're in the room, great. Otherwise, sending out surveys by email and or mail, asking people if they would spend 30 minutes on the phone and interviewing them, bringing a group of people together for a focus group or group discussion, just generally, like, the more you can go to the source and find out from them about their preferences and their motivations, the better. I would add that obviously looking at the data is also important, because I could say all the things on a survey or an interview, but it's what I do at the end of the day that really matters. So what data do you have access to? And maybe this is, you
Mm.
might have some more to say about this here. Right now, can I see there's what somebody says, and then there's what's, like I said, what somebody does. So somebody might say they hate email, but they actually open and click on every email we send them. Or the opposite, right? Might be the case that they love hearing from us, but we see that they've never actually opened anything. So I think looking at the data, seeing what people are, in the case of email, what are they clicking on? Is there a time of day or week that we learn performs better? So what data do we have access to across our communications channels, and looking for trends, both to understand what's happening now, but then to make future decisions around. And then finally, sometimes there are studies that are out there that other people have done. For example, the Pew Internet and American Life Project, pewinternet.org, publishes studies all the time about social media use, or behaviors among certain audiences, and that can give you information to see what's happening across. What is the typical membership association looking like? I don't know. Perhaps you all produce data and reports. So, is there any data out there that you can use also to extract insights?
Right. And what we're finding nowadays is that our association members have become increasingly busy. Many of them are professional associations. So the members are like doctors, lawyers, dentists, they're like very,
Right.
very busy, right? So then
Yeah.
they wouldn't always like have the time to participate in surveys or any focus groups. And we're finding that in the moment surveys, in the moment feedback is very powerful. So if you're on a
Yeah.
webinar, the people are already there, ask,
You have this, yeah, have the little polls come up, ask at the end of it. Also incentivize. At the end of the day, if anyone's ever taken a marketing class, you're probably familiar with the phrase, what's in it for me?
Yeah.
WIFM. And as much as we want to think everybody's out to do good in the world, and I hope they are, and they should be, they're busy, like you said. And so what's in it for me? Why are you asking for my feedback? What are you going to do as a result of it? So always give context, and explanation for why you're doing something, and then consider if you should incentivize people to participate. So depending on the audience, what would a bunch of dentists need to participate? They probably don't need free toothbrushes and toothpaste, but maybe there's something else you can give to them that would make their lives better. Right? Maybe it's a book. Maybe it's a discount for your upcoming conference. Maybe it's something else. And then they get entered into a raffle to get X, a dinner with Farhad. So whatever that might be, that's the kind of thing to think about. Again, like, these folks are busy. They've got a lot on their mind. If they're going to give you some information, how are you going to use it? And then the last thing I would suggest, some organizations we'll find that they actually have very vocal members who want to
Mhm.
give their opinion and are the first ones to raise their hand when you ask. And in fact, you don't even have to ask because they're contacting you to tell you what's on their mind. You might consider actually creating an advisory committee and say to that group, hey, you want to volunteer with us. You love what we do. We love that you have a lot of impassioned feedback and ideas. We're going to create an advisory committee. We're going to ask you to meet, once every other month. We're going to periodically send you things for your feedback and then create a place where maybe that group also becomes almost like an in-house evergreen focus group. People love to give you their opinion. Just make sure that if you ask for their opinion, you've got some mechanisms in place to use it and honor it in case you hear something otherwise.
That's a very good point. How many times have we seen that there are surveys, there is feedback, but no one is doing anything about them?
Right, right.
And speaking about incentivizing, I guess like one example I want to like share is whenever we go to a trade show with our booth, or if our company has a booth, we actually give away $10 or $20 cash, like for anyone booking a demo of our platform. It's not a raffle. Anyone booking a demo on the spot wins, puts their hand in a bag. They'll grab a bill of a $10 or a $20 bill, so it's like an instant gratification like for the person.
Yeah. I mean, we all love instant gratification if you can provide it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Alrighty.
It can also be, sometimes it's, when people participate, you're going to make a donation in their name to another organization. Again,
Yeah.
it all like what do you know will motivate your members to participate and then use that motivation or test some things and see what you even learn from that.
Right. Okay. So once we know like who and where, so who are the people we want to prioritize, and then like how to kind
Mhm.
of like reach out to them. What do you do next?
Yeah, well, this is the part where this is where most of us live, which is what are the approaches or strategies I should take to reach the people I'm trying to reach, and where should I be spending my time? What are the specific activities I should be doing? What are the tactics I should put in place? What communications channels should I be using? So we define strategies as basically the approach you take to, toward engaging that audience to reaching that goal. So, for example, again, this is where that context matters. If I'm an organization that's facing a lot like a low retention rate, I'm having a hard time holding on to the members that I acquire year over year, then I need to focus on what can I do to increase that retention rate, to hold on to the people I have, because we know often getting new people costs more than holding on to the ones we have. And that usually once you can hold on to somebody, get them to renew once or twice, they're much more likely to stay. So if that is your organization's and your goal is to really look at increasing membership retention in this example, then what is the best way to do that? What do you have? And it might be, okay, in this case, we're going to create an ambassador strategy. And what we're going to do is create a toolkit and then a series of activities to get existing members to help us hold on to like the members who have been active and who have renewed year over year to help us maybe become a buddy or reach out to newer members, right? That might be something that we do. And then related to that, we're going to create a LinkedIn group and we're going to create monthly happy hours and whatever it may be. But thinking about what's the road we need to take to get to that destination. And then related to that, again, what are those specific activities? We have a whole ebook about strategy, which I'll put out in the comments in a moment. It's at bigduck.com/insights. But in essence, what we talk about there is, again, setting that goal, understanding your audience, building out a strategy, and then the tactics. And a strategy is meant to be an approach or direction. For example, create an ambassador strategy or create an ambassador or leverage ambassadors to renew membership. And then there's specific activities underneath it. A strategy is not um, finite. It is not the activity itself. It is something that lends itself to how am I actually going to accomplish that? So that's where you start. And it can also start, if you haven't already, this is the time to actually evaluate what you have been doing. Is what you're doing working? Is it not working?
Mhm.
What's working well that you should keep doing? What should we often talk about asking yourself, what should I start? What should I stop? And what should I test? Right? So a really good set of questions to ask is, what we know is working is like, wow, okay, we send out our email, we see that we get a great response rate, people are clicking on things. we should keep doing that. Maybe we're going to do more. Maybe we're going to test adding a new email that we send in addition to what we've been doing. But actually, what we see is we're not getting any activity on Facebook anymore unless we pay for advertising. So either we're going to test doing more advertising on Facebook, or we're actually going to not worry about that channel as much anymore, right? This is also a good thing to say. Again, what should I start? What should I stop? What should I continue? And really, what should I test?
Right. And I guess oftentimes when you are working on your marketing day to day, you forget about the big picture altogether. And I don't think like a lot of people actually have a one pager or maybe like a one document where they list every
Right.
single channel and then activity within the channel, right? So I think like if we did that, so channel activity within the channel, that'll be like one way for us to all know where like what are we doing, and then we can
Hmm.
take a step back and evaluate like what to
Hmm.
start, what to stop, and then like what to test.
Exactly.
Right. Okay. Good.
Exactly.
Good. Okay. So let's talk about channels, Farah. So
Yeah.
in general, I guess like there are a number of channels we can use. So a few channels that we like to talk about is first of all the email newsletter that the association send out. So that is like a thing that everyone does in general. Or I
Hmm.
hope you have newsletter that you're sending out, right? So that's one. And then there are maybe like email blasts in between about activities or initiatives. There's that. There's social. There's their website, the public website, and then oftentimes people will also have a member portal like our platform, which is more like a member portal, like a private member portal where members can
Hmm.
log in and they can get all the content and services. If we look at all of that, how would you prioritize these channels, and then like how would you go about like the campaigns within them?
Yeah, I mean, the answer how I would prioritize those channels goes back to what I've just learned about my audiences, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't, I wouldn't give a one size fits all. It really
Right.
depends on our organization, what we're able to keep up to date and do well. I'd rather see organizations use less channels well and effectively than try to be in
Mm,
10 different places. So I think it depends on, where are we seeing that response? Where are we seeing that activity? Where are we seeing that engagement? And then that would determine what I would prioritize. There's also, for example, we know that over the past few years, using video is great content for social media, for interaction, whether they're reels on Instagram or on Facebook, or we've got videos we're doing on TikTok, um, or even just videos people are sharing generally. But if your organization doesn't have good content for a video, you don't have the ability to take good video, then
mm,
like that may not be for you, right? There's what do we know that's working out there? What do we maybe see other associations doing? That's the other thing I often recommend is if you haven't already, figure out who your peers and partners are, look at how they're communicating and see what you can learn from them. Maybe even consider joining an association that's similar to yours just to see how you're treated. How are they using their email? What's there on their member portal? We're all learning from each other. We're all trying to solve the same questions. So I couldn't tell you, well, you should prioritize newsletters over, TikTok. It really depends
mm.
on your organization, who your audience is, and what you're trying to accomplish. So where are you seeing that traction? Where do you have the right team and the content in place? And that's what you should probably be prioritizing. Where are you seeing and hearing from your members that that's where they want you to be and that's what they need information on, right? You might put all this energy into writing this gorgeous newsletter, but if no one is clicking on it, then something needs to change. Maybe you need to change. That doesn't mean you stop the newsletter. It might mean you change when you send it out, you change the length of it, you change who it is sent from, when it is sent. So again, we have to look at all these things across a number of dimensions.
And I guess sometimes what we would see is that a certain channel activity is working for one segment of members, but not for the others, and a separate channel is working
Right.
for another segment. And when that happens, we shouldn't just like shy away. So if one segment has like low activity, but a key segment of membership is engaging with that, we shouldn't shy away from just using it a little more to see if we can expand that audience there.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good, good. Farah, so I want to like double click on newsletters a bit more because this is so common.
Sure.
So if we were to structure, so in an ideal newsletter for an association, right? If we were to
Mm.
like tasked with designing the ideal newsletter for an organization, what would you do?
Ooh, that's an interesting question. First, I would design it for mobile. If you haven't already done that, you want to make sure your newsletter looks good on the phone because most people are going to be reading it on the go while they're doing six other things. They're not always going to be reading it 9 to 5 on their laptop, or do people still have desktops? Um, you know, when you maybe have written it and when you're thinking about work, people are reading it on their own time, different times a day. So is it mobile friendly? Is it set up for mobile? That's the first question. Is it one column? Um, and then I would just look at, what are the most important things people need to know to engage with us? What, again, will they find valuable? How do I make it clear and simple? Sometimes I still see e-newsletters that take a very print newsletter mentality.
Hmm.
The old school ones, some organizations still have that are, 4 pages and there's lots of print and it's very dense. Like e-newsletter should be simple. The button to click should be obvious. And that's the thing is that the point of the newsletter is to inform and engage, right? Give me enough information so I know what's going on, but pull me to do something. Pull me to sign up for an event, to renew my membership, to, get a book, whatever the thing is. So not just looking at your open rates for the newsletters you're sending out, but the click-through rates. Are people actually engaging with the content? And if you see that those have gone up or gone down, let's say from last year to this year, then try to figure out what's different and how to do more of the thing that is increasing. And if you're hitting a wall and you can't figure out why, let's say the response has gone down, these are great things again to bring in front of people and get their feedback on. What do you
That's
think, Farhad, it goes into a good member newsletter? I'm going to turn the table on you.
No, for sure, for sure. So we can actually share some of our experience in this. We do have not an e-newsletter, but like a bi-weekly digest we sent out, but we haven't been sending out for some time. But in the digest that we send out, something that really works is we open the email with a story of something that
Mm,
recently happened. So maybe we went to a conference and then we learned something about that. We interviewed a client and we learned something new. So we always open the newsletter, the digest, we call it, with a story. And then the story actually has a call to action to our next event or next something. So in the
mhm,
story part at the top, we always have a call to action, but the call to action is like something very concrete, either a downloadable or a next event or something like that. And after that, we have like upcoming events or other news, and then we have our other blogs, maybe past podcast episodes, all that. So that's what we do. But the one thing that works really well is a very catchy subject line, which changes every
mm,
single time. The subject
mhm.
line should never contain the word newsletter in there, right? So
Yes.
it has to be the subject
Or
line
the
has to be
month. I sadly see organizations that say like September 2024 newsletter. It's like my dad leaving me voicemail messages telling me what day it is or what time it is. I'm like, I see it on the envelope. And I actually also know it's you, but that's fine. You can tell me it's you. But it doesn't need to say September newsletter. It should, to your point, say what it's about. Back to school, get new tools for X.
exactly, exactly. And someone actually sent me a catch newsletter, which it was a clickbaity, but I opened it, and the subject line was, "Is this better?" Question mark. I'm like, why is he sending me an email saying, "Is this
All
better?"
right.
Question mark. And then there was a
Right.
story how they didn't like pay enough attention to the subject line in the previous newsletter, so it didn't go well. So this time, the subject of the
That's
next one
funny.
is this better?
That's cute. That's cute.
Yeah. Okay, good, good. Alrighty. Thanks to Brian Fagan and Bridget Goddank for submitting questions about newsletters. Thank you so much for that. Okay, so next question from Lucinda Ethan. So Lucinda was talking about the frequency of emails and what types of emails to send to their members without overloading them overall. This is a question we get at every podcast, every webinar, so we'll answer it
Hmm.
one more time.
Well, and I don't know if I'll answer it differently or the same as your colleagues. I generally recommend, again, you've got to look at your data and your metrics to see what's happening and to see if things are moving the needle or lowering the needle. I think a monthly newsletter as just kind of the basic, straightforward, here's what's happening is good. And then if you have different content that we know people are interested in and a reason, so for example, at Big Duck, we send out a monthly newsletter, but then we send out twice a month separate standalone emails about our latest podcast.
Hmm.
So because we know that that is specific content that while they are listed and included in our newsletter, people want to know when the latest podcast episode is out. We've gotten good feedback on that. We're still seeing good open and click through rates. But if ever we were to see that go down, we might cut that. So again, I think it depends on the activities. If you've got a big conference or event coming up, likely leading up to that, and you were asking a little bit before about campaigns, right? There might be things that you're plugging in and having to promote. So certain times of the year, you might send more email and send specific newsletters or updates about different things. But again, it's hard to answer that generally without knowing. There are organizations or political candidates who email every day or 6 times a day, depending on the
Hmm.
list that you're on. I think you have to look at the data and see what's happening, but I would say probably 2 to 4 times a month if I have to give a general number to start with. But again, I'd want to look at what my organization's been doing and see again, should I try just moving a little bit and see what happens? Again, this comes back to testing. So I wouldn't go from sending one email a month to six. I
Hmm.
might go from one to two or three, see what starts happening. The other thing that I know has been put out there as a practice for people to follow the past few years has been, email list hygiene, where you go in and
Hmm.
actually see that, like, okay, maybe Farhad's been on my email list for 3 years, but actually he hasn't opened an email in 2 years. So this email is just going to his inbox. Maybe it's going in the promotion tab. He's never looking at it. So you can, there's some suggestions out there that if somebody hasn't opened an email from you in 6 months, you stop sending them. Then they may still be on your email list, and maybe you email them when you've got a big push for something like your conference or some other big event. But then otherwise, if you cut back on the people receiving the email and focus on the people who are more likely to engage with it and actually open it, you're going to see your open and click through rates go up because now we've just kind of cut the people who kind of opted out in some ways. You also can try to reactivate and send an email to that group of people and say, hey, do you still want to hear from us? Is this better? Right? Is this information of interest to you? And see if that actually reactivates them. So that's another question when you're thinking about email is not just the frequency, but of course the content, the days of week you're sending, but also who's getting it. And should you consider segments? Maybe you send that newsletter out to everyone, but you've seen that there are a certain group of people who are particularly interested in, let's say your association does advocacy work. So let's do an advocacy newsletter that's just focused on that for people who care about that. So again, I think it really comes back to what content does your organization have and what would people be interested in?
Yeah, and I just want to like share a quick story of one of our clients. Our platform Member Lounge actually sends out a lot of automated engagement messages. So for example, if someone is using Member Lounge and there was an event posted, upcoming webinar, the platform itself will send out some automatic emails saying, hey, there's an event coming up. So one event, one big banner, with the upcoming event, and then a list of other events at the bottom, and then more organic messages. So whenever there is a discussion forum post, like what is there, it sends out an email to everyone who's following that group altogether, right? So we send a lot of like organic automated messages like that, and there's more than that. So and we found that with the organic timely messages, the
Mm-hmm.
we were able to like triple the engagement like of that association in a matter of 6 months. So that is literally triple the like number of monthly active users in a matter of 6 months. And we have seen it in our data that it is possible. So a lot of associations, if you're thinking that, like we can never double our engagement, we can never triple our engagement, like we have seen this happen, we have data, it is possible. If you do the right things, like what Farah is saying, if you follow the right approaches, the right communication strategies, it is definitely possible. So the one thing I want to add to the mix is that if you have a good member engagement tool, either Member Lounge or something else, and if you have like designed the organic messages properly, then members are very likely to engage with the organic messages that are very timely as well.
Yeah, great.
Okay. Alrighty. Good. Sorry, Farah, do you have any comments on that? Automatic organic messages.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think those are great to sort of mix in, right? Like, so doing like a welcome series, right? That
Hmm.
automatically goes on the trigger date of when somebody joined, or renews. I've also seen organizations figure out when someone's birthday is, or I see this actually, you mentioned dentist. I get this from my dentist office. Happy birthday. Like clearly, they've got my birthday in their database and they send me an email on my birthday or a text message. Sure. So I do think those like automatic messages that come as a result of when somebody does something, it feels like, oh, you're listening to me. right? Because you
Yeah.
have to remember that a member or a donor for organizations who also do fundraising or a program participant, you're not the only person they're communicating with. And in fact, they're probably getting a lot of communications from much more fancy, expensive for-profit companies. So, for example, I think it's interesting to look at what is Amazon doing? What is Netflix doing? Right? Amazon years ago, I use this example a lot. Years ago, they started sending emails that were like, hey, Sarah, because you read this book, we think you might be interested in this book because it's a similar theme, or the author you like and now follow on Amazon, they've just put out a new book. You might want to buy it or, listen to the ebook. Same thing with Netflix. Netflix knows my viewing habits, sees what I do, and then makes suggestions for me of content I might be interested in because of actions I've taken. So now I've almost gotten used to this like customized experience based on my preferences. And so because people are getting used to that, they start coming to expect more personalization, more customization from everybody, from nonprofits, from associations. So I think anything that feels like it is in response to something somebody has done, and if there's a way to do that, like I don't know if your tool does this. I know some technology can also time when a message is sent based on when the person is most likely to open it. So that if Farah on our list happens to, read lots of emails at 6:30 a.m. during the week, but Farhad tends to look at it on Sundays at 1 p.m., that same newsletter can go to you at 1 o'clock on Sunday, at me at 6:30 a.m. on Friday. And actually, we're both more likely to open and click on it because that's the time that we might be online and doing stuff. So I don't know if your tool does that, but that's something I think that's really interesting that some technologies can do.
Yeah, and like all these personalizations that we are talking about, so we have a lot of AI behind our platform as well to kind of like make sure that we send the right content to the right people at the right time in general.
Mm-hmm.
And now like so for the audience here, you cannot do this manually. Like if you're thinking of doing it manually, like hiring 4 people, like
Oh,
each person
gosh.
is a segment. Do not do that. There's technology that can do that. It's way cheaper to do it with technology. Technology will not make the mistakes, and you can scale faster by applying a good technology on top of everything. So yeah, so if you're shying away from using an advanced email or engagement tool, I would say please look at a few to see what makes more sense for your organization. All right. So Farah, the next question is from Lindsay Mensch, and Lindsay is asking how to manage and communicate big changes in member experience.
Yeah, that's it. It sort of depends what that member experience is going to be and what that change is, right? Because that change could be, hey, we know you're used to having a conference every year because of our finances. We can't bring you all together, right? And then that becomes a challenge. Or it may be we're increasing the cost of membership, and we know you've been paying X, but because of our own inflation and things we've been dealing with, we have to increase that. So if it's a change that especially is a change that you anticipate might have a negative response, I think I always think it's important to be authentic in the communication, to be as real as possible, to think about, the who and the when and the what of what you're delivering. So who should that message come from? Is the right format an email? Is it a video? Is it a webinar where you invite people into a conversation and a discussion where they can interact with you about it? And when you've got a big change, you have to communicate about it more than once and in more than one channel. I think that there was something that we got a question in advance about multi-channel communications or
Yeah.
omni-channel. The thing is, we can't just email once about something and expect everyone has read it. People need to see something. I think it's the law of effective frequency that you need to see something at least 7 times till you actually hear it and see it. So I think once you figure out what you need to communicate and how to communicate about it, you have to do it several times and in several different places. But you're laughing or smiling. So what's coming up for you on this, Farhad?
No, for sure. So, yeah, like you mentioned, whenever there's a big change, you cannot expect the change to be taken positively by everyone. When you're looking at like a big spectrum of membership, there will be people who will be very opinionated about that and expect that. I would say, like, don't be surprised when you hear some pushback, and then expect that and like prepare some messages like to follow up with those people as well, because be sure this will come, and then you have to be prepared on like what you do next.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, good, good. So there was a good question by Brian Fagan as well. So Brian was asking, in addition to engagement tactics, do you have recommendations for conversion optimization following engagement? So I think like what I'm thinking is you send a newsletter and then maybe people are
Mm.
opening it. What do you do next? How do you drive better conversion from
Hmm.
that piece of content?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think the first thing is testing the landing page of where you're sending people to,
Mm,
right? So first is like, what's if we're trying to get people to renew their membership, or we're trying to get people to sign up for our conference, or we're trying to get people to enroll in a class. If we're trying to make sure that we convert on that page we send them to, first of all, how easy is that page to fill out? Is it clear what you're asking me to do? Is the value compelling? Again, how does it look on your phone, not just on your screen? Um, so I think testing it, and then also considering if there is anything you want to test, read about landing pages for X, whatever you're trying to do. Like I said, renew membership, sell a conference, see if there's anything you want to try differently, and then make sure that page is set up for as much, fulfillment as possible. Then again, it's the reminders. It's not just, once somebody goes to that page, you see this again, and I see this in a lot of places where I do online shopping. I might be on a website looking at a sweater, and then I'm like, I'll look. I'm still thinking about this. I don't want to buy this right now. I'll come back later. Then I get an email that's like, hey, were you looking at this sweater? Here's a link to it just to make it easy. It's right in your inbox. So depending on the tools that you have, sometimes you can remind people if they have not completed the task, or what we call abandoned that page you
mm,
sent them to. You also, again, depending on the volume of people we're talking about, you might even call them. You might leave a message or actually call them and just say, hey, I know you got our email that it's time to sign up for X. We see you haven't done that yet. I wanted to see if there's any questions I can answer for you that's getting in your way. Like, what are the barriers? Try to find that out and then support them. So I just think it's about follow up. And it's
mm.
also about really trying to make sure you're doing everything you can for once that somebody gets there, it's easy to take that action, it's clear and it's compelling.
Yeah, and like something to add to that, there was one time where we were experimenting with email campaigns, and we would send out one email blast to to a whole group, and then a couple of days later we would resend the same email to the people who didn't open it. Right, so it
Hmm.
was like resent to unopened, and
Yeah.
that was tremendous. And then eventually, I think we switched our email tool, and the new tool didn't support that anymore.
Yeah, and the thing about the resend to non-opens is usually it's just change the subject line. Can be the
Mm.
same message, but just try a new subject line. Or sometimes you see what we call the kind of fake forward, right? Like forward with the name of the same subject
Oh,
line. That's like,
oh my God,
hey, I don't think you
yeah.
saw Farhad's email. I wanted to make sure to bring it to the top of your inbox. It's like one sentence, and then it's got that email in there. That's also a great email trick.
Right, right, right. Okay. Are there things that you have tried, like campaigns, emails, where you have seen like tremendous conversion? Any examples that come to mind?
Um, I mean, typically deadlines and
Deadlines.
discounts.
Yeah.
That said, deadlines I have like a love-hate relationship with. So, 3 days to act, 24 hours, and this will expire. Um, we do see people get motivated if something is going to be like has a time bound moment on it. And we also don't want to create a false sense of urgency when there isn't one.
Mm,
Um, so I think when you use deadlines, just be really mindful of how you're saying it and how you're framing it. Again, this is where being on other people's lists, seeing how they talk about it, can be really helpful and give you some insight into that. Um, I think, like I said, like the more you can bring personality in, so
mm,
much of Big Duck's work is about branding and thinking about who are you as an organization? What is your personality? What are the emotions, the tone and style someone should associate with you? And then how do you infuse that into your brand and communications? So thinking about how to get your message to actually stand out, to have some kind of feeling, to be genuine and real, and not sound like a robot wrote it or it was written for a grant and it's got all this like academic sounding voice, unless you are an academic association, in which case maybe you need that academic sounding voice. But make it interesting, make it feel like it came from somebody. Um, I think then you see that people are much more likely to be interested in seeing what's in there. Figure out where you can bring in a little bit of personality, a little bit of voice into what you're communicating.
Right, right. So speaking of that, talking about emotions, should we use strong emotions in the subject lines or anywhere in the language, like work with people's fears, anger, pain, gain?
I don't love fear-based stuff or
No? Okay.
pain. I'm not a big fan. We may have a different opinion here, so we can talk about it. Um, I think it's important to realize people are emotional and
Hmm.
emotions are real, and there are things to be emotional about, and we shouldn't be manipulating or exploiting.
Right.
So, I think when you overly guilt someone or you try to scare them about something, you're actually going to turn them off, and you
Hmm.
might cause a lot more harm than open up and create good.
Hmm.
So, I am a fan of like, hope and excitement. I think fear is real. There are things that are happening that could be really scary. So if you're going to use that, like I would just want to make sure it makes sense for you, it makes sense in this moment, and that you're not overusing that.
Got it. Got it.
But
That's
what
a
do you think
dilemma.
on this topic?
Yeah, that's a dilemma I always have. Like I am
Mhm.
always like I have like that abundant mindset philosophy overall, right? I like to
Right.
like work with hope,
Exactly.
optimism overall. But then like when we use some fear-based maybe email subject line, they work so well. They work so well. We tested a few, and then like they work so
Mhm.
well because like that tells me, you know what, maybe we are not doing this enough because like we cannot just like work with the positive hope all the time without showing some of the fearful side of our nature overall. So I think like what I'm thinking is that maybe use a bit of it but not too much, like you mentioned, use a bit of it not too much,
Yeah.
but then like show the hope right after, right? That okay, this is, I know this is painful, I know you're afraid of
Mhm.
this, but there is hope.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, like I think just because something works doesn't mean it's something we should do. So this is where you
Yeah,
have to come in with your
true.
own, like, what's important to your organization? What values do you hold? If your organization is committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, accessibility,
Yeah.
anti-racism, belonging, whatever there's so many things coming through in that, then really seeing where you can hold that, and what's important. And it may even be saying like, hey, we we are really trying to come from a place of abundance and optimism, and we do believe in hope, and we see some real things happening, and this is what we're actually facing now. So not to scare or fearmonger, but to say, here's the reality of what's happening, here's what we're concerned about. We need you so that we can tell a very different story. I think it's just long as it's all in the balance and all, like I said, and not doing it. You don't want to be sky is falling every single
Yeah.
time. So yeah, it's just these are the kind of things to just question and be intentional about.
Got it. Got it. All right. The next question is from Ellie Wanley. So Ellie is asking, I'm working on building a web portal for young people that centralizes all the communication with them. Do you have any tips for engagement with them, knowing that I work for an intergovernmental organization? Yeah, Farah, do you want to take that or do you want me to?
I'll start, but this
Sure.
sounds like a depth of expertise that you may have more than I do. I mean, I think I'm building a web portal for young people. Just starting with the first part of that is this is where you definitely want to get that user feedback, that user engagement from the beginning, looking at other web portals for young people, working with young people to find out from them what they're looking for once you have a prototype, having them test it and review it if you have an existing web portal, finding out where they're going, where they're finding questions, where they're not finding what they're looking for, just to make sure that, like, if you want to use a portal to communicate with them, how are they reacting to it? I would also raise for young people these days, depending on how you're defining that, the web portal might actually not be the right place. They
Hmm.
might want an app. They might want to see you show up in a space on Instagram as a broadcast channel they can join. And that's more important than a portal. So I also think this is where learning about that audience is going to be really important. So I would go to that part of the question, but I bet Farhad, you've got some good insight here.
No, for sure. So what we have found as well, there is research that Gen Zers in general, Zoomers we call them, Zoomers are actually they like when they grew up with a lot of like different devices and content around them. As a result, different parts of their brains have developed slightly differently, and that's why they consume and produce content at a much faster rate compared to previous generations. Like I'm a millennials compared to us and others, Zoomers will actually engage with content much faster. They create content much faster. So two things that come to mind here. Number one, the content has to be short form to begin with. So you have to like tease them with some short form and with some like lead into the long form. So you cannot just blast long form and expect it to work, right? So you have to kind of like have the like long form, but then start with the short form in everything. So there is that like inverted funnel analogy in journalism that like if you want to like write say one sentence at the top, what is the most important sentence you want to write? So start with that. That is the short form content. So if you want to do that, so the most short form, most impactful content out there as a teaser, maybe on Instagram or on TikTok, and then from there links back to longer form content. So that works really well. Also, Zoomers are we have found in general they are actually very vocal because they grew up in a generation where they have a direct communication channel to the president of the United States on Twitter, X, or any other channel. They can tweet at them directly. Like it's not like 30 years ago where you have no channel. So right now they have a channel. So since they have channels, they want to be vocal. So doesn't matter whether people are listening to them or not. They want the satisfaction of being able to share, being able to like share, like express their opinion. So if you have a web portal where it's mostly static and the members, the audience are the young generation are not able to contribute, they're not able to engage, they're not able to comment, that may be something that will not work very well for them or may not work very well for them. If you let them in, if you let them comment, and then if you involve them in the creation of the content, that will be mind-blowing. So like Farah mentioned earlier that like you need to like find who are the most vocal people and create like an advisory group or committee. I think that will be very powerful in a scenario like this. But also like if it's an intergovernmental organization, you want to be very careful like who you invite into the advisory group, right? So the most vocal people may not be the right ones all the time. So it also has to be someone who's very constructive, like Farah mentioned. Like with the people should be coming with hope and optimism overall, and not like with fear and anger and all that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'll take the next question from Erin Stewart. So Erin is asking, how do you track and effectively analyze data? What program would you use? Do you have any thoughts?
Well, typically, we're often pulling data into spreadsheets on Excel or Google Sheets from
Mm,
other places, or looking at data based on the tool it comes through. So, for example, Salesforce, and looking at the
mm.
reports that come through there. But I'm curious, Farhad, what about you on this question?
Yeah, same in general. But then, like something that we started working with a client recently is that we have to understand that when you're sending out different campaigns and when you have like different sources of data, it'll be very difficult for you to gather everything together. So then make sure that you are gathering the most important piece of data from that tool. So for example, if it's like email campaigns, right, then like I think you want to look at email open rates and click-through rates. These are like very important. And if you have another tool, like say on Member Lounge, how many times a member is logging in, that is important, or how many times someone is posting on the discussion forum, so that may be important. And then what we have to do in the end is that you need to like take the different pieces of data together, and then you need a third system that is able to combine the different sources together. You need that, right? That's how you get the 360-degree view of the data. There are tools like that. So Power BI is one, and there's another like a great Ottawa company that does that. Is called Clipfolio. So Clipfolio will actually like take the different sources of data, and it will give you like one dashboard combining everything, and it will also know like it has a way to like track one member and follow it at like different sources, right? That way you'll know like the whole engagement that is happening with one member. So the bottom line is that take the highlights of data from each like platform and then have a place where you can combine the different sources together. Power BI is a very simple one to start with, and then if you want to get fancy, then Clipfolio is a tool as well.
Well,
Okay, so next question is from Amethyst Yell. That's an interesting name, Amethyst.
yeah.
So Amethyst is,
Amethyst, my favorite, purple.
yeah, yeah,
Take it.
exactly, right. Amethyst is asking if the organization operates fully remote, and how do we engage our community?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting. I think that's an interesting question because I have seen so many organizations focused on being fully remote and operating in fully remote ways since 2020. And so I think that has been, I've seen lots of organizations do online events or webinars or conversations like this, hosting smaller communities of practice or cohorts, again, figuring out what ways does your community want to come together? Do they want networking? Do they want social time? Do they want to meet an expert or be able to commiserate with people like them going through the same thing? So if we can find out what our community needs, then we can host that space. So webinars or get online gatherings tend to be what you see, but that could be workshops, it could be mini conferences, like I said, could be networking, could be support groups. So I see a lot of people using Zoom and different webinar tools in different ways for that, or trying to put it across several different days with breaks and guest speakers, and again, lots of different tools there. That's what I've seen come through the most. And we also know there's a lot of Zoom fatigue, right? Many of us are on Zoom all day, every day, and having to come to yet another meeting may not be great. So another thing some groups are doing are like regional in-person gatherings.
Mm,
So still, like, if you can't bring everyone together at one place or it's too expensive, to have small meetups or even facilitating that where there might be even hybrid online and offline components. I'm curious, Farhad, what do you think about this one? Have you seen other ways that groups have been engaging the community?
I will be so biased on this. Amethyst, you need to do a free trial of Member Lounge. Just free
Uh-oh,
trial, see what happens. See what happens, right?
there you go.
All right. So yeah. So just to like summarize this, I guess like when you have an online portal where that is like a private LinkedIn for your members and members can log in, even if you do not have an office, right? Even if you are fully remote, giving them that online space where the members can belong goes a long way. The members log into your online portal like Member Lounge. If you log in there, they will see the other members that are online. They will see other posts. They will see the whole community. They will see your content. They will see everything, and they will actually feel that belonging, right? So even if you don't have like that office, or if you're not like a local, you can actually like simulate that in an online environment by giving members one place to log in.
Yeah,
So yeah, so do a free trial of Member Launch for sure.
there you go.
All right. So next question is from Jessica Daly. So Jessica is asking, when it comes to executing a communication strategy in a small but growing organization, how do you begin to build out the roles?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think staffing is a really important part of any communications function and a communications plan. And so starting to first by understanding what is the purpose of communications for our organization, whether you do that through a communications plan or just very focused conversations, and then understanding what do you need to make that happen. We need a good writer, we need a good storyteller, we need someone who's great with video, we need someone who's a good designer. So when you know what the content you're trying to produce is, you can figure out what are the different roles. Often there's a question around, do we need strategy or do we need tactics, right? Maybe we have someone on the outside who's helped us create a strategy. Now we just need people to roll up their sleeves and do it, or vice versa. We have someone who's great at strategy, but we need help getting the work done. So I think it depends on what you need and what you have. Some organizations wind up pulling communication skills and activities from different roles across the organization. They don't have
Mm,
a communications person or a communications department. But hey, this person on this team is a great writer. This person on this team is a great photographer. We're going to have them take pictures at our gathering, and they pull things together. Another activity is just looking again at your peers and seeing at how they structure it, and see if there's any
mm,
insights we can get from how they structure, and see if that is something that we should consider in building out our team. But many organizations, I would say, under budget and understaffed for communications.
yeah.
And Kivi LaRue Miller puts out a great survey every year of communications trends. And she often will look at what is the size of a communications team based on an organizational budget. I'll tweet out the link. I'll chat out the link to get that. And that could be just looking again at different benchmarks. If you can find out how other associations, maybe it's a good question to ask in the member lounge, right? How are you staffing? What size is your team? What are the roles? And see if you can get any insights from that.
Right. Okay. So for the sake of time, we'll take the last question from Desiree. But before that, if anyone in the audience has any question, please type on chat and we will answer them right away. So the question from Desiree is, should organizations have different messages for different communication channels, or should it be a common message but delivered differently depending on the audience?
Both ends. I don't think that you should have literally the same message that you copy and paste everywhere. And sometimes the tone on one channel might be a little different on the tone on another. So I think that it really depends on what the message is and what different communications channels you're using. I don't think you want to sound like three different organizations, though. So I think you have to be careful that if you go so segmented that like the vibe the organization is on LinkedIn is very different than who they are on Instagram, is very different from when you go to their conference, that will create confusion. But how you say it and what you put out there maybe is more what you should be doing. But again, we don't want to just copy and paste the same thing, or like, years ago, we used to see people using hashtags on channels where people weren't using hashtags. Like you have to make sure it makes sense given the channel you're in and how you're communicating there.
Got it. Like, what about the length? Does the length matter?
I mean, I would say yes. And this is where it comes. If you Google, depending on the channel that you're in, you can search for what's the ideal character count for an XYZ post to get. Like, there's definitely, I don't have it off the top of my head. There's definitely recommendations for how long a subject line should be. How long should your Facebook or Instagram post be? Should you put a link in the main post or in the comments? There's all sorts of guidance out there if you just want to like figure out a few communications channels to learn well. And then there are blogs and podcasts dedicated to you understanding how to use that channel well. It's just a matter of taking some time, picking a few to learn about, and then just going down into it.
Wonderful. All right. So with that, I think we have to wrap up the question period. If anyone has any questions, one last question, please type on chat and we'll get to them right away. So Farra, so what would be your key takeaway for the audience today?
Well, my key takeaway for the audience is audiences. Like, it's really, again, it's not one size fits all. It comes down to like, know who your audiences are, what they care about, what matters to them, what their preferences are, what their motivations and values are, and then tailor what you're doing to that information.
Got it. Alrighty. Farra, what is the best way to reach out to you? You just posted, I see. Is email the best way?
I didn't even know you were going to do that. Email farra@bigduck.com or be my friend on LinkedIn. I am just Farra on LinkedIn, Farra. You can find me, but it's just or my name, Farra Trompeter. But yeah, happy to connect with people there and wherever.
Wonderful. Farra, thank you so much for doing this for us. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Everyone have a great day out there.
Alrighty, so that was the episode with Farra. I hope you got lots of good nuggets overall from the episode. And like I always say, we learn a lot from these episodes, but what matters is which ones of these we are prioritizing and what are we executing on. Unless you take action, unless you take these ideas and actually put them into action in real projects, real items, nothing will happen. So I invite you all to take one or two key takeaways from this whole episode and then start working on them immediately. So with that, we're going to wrap up the episode for today. Once again, I'm Farhad Khan from Member Lounge, and we hold lots of events every month. We have a webinar, we have podcast, and you can actually go to our website, that is memberlounge.app, to see our upcoming events. Alrighty then, with that, we will wrap up. I wish you all the best with your membership journey. Bye for now.